Today, we're going to talk about negatives. And in order to do that, we're going to have to introduce one of the fundamental secrets of Japanese that the schools and textbooks almost never tell you. And it makes the whole of Japanese much, much easier. But before we get to that, let's look at the fundamental basis of Japanese negatives. The fundamental basis of negatives is the adjective nai. This adjective means non-exist, not be. The word for exist for any object, any inanimate thing, the sky, the sea, the universe, a grain of rice, a flower, a tree, anything is aru. So, if we want to say there is a pen exists, we say pen ga aru. But if we want to say there isn't a pen, we say pen ga nai. Now, why do we use a verb for being and an adjective for non-being? Because this happens throughout Japanese. Whenever we do something, we use a verb. Whether we walk or sing or run or anything, that's a verb. But if we don't do it, then we attach nai to the verb, and that becomes the engine of the sentence. So when we say we're not doing something, we're not using a verb, we're using an adjective. Why is that? Because Japanese is very logical. When we do something, an action is taking place, that's a verb. But when we don't do it, no action is taking place, and we are describing a state of non-action. So that's an adjective. Alright, so do we want to say there is no pen? We say pen ga nai. But what if we want to say this is not a pen? That's not quite the same thing, is it? So how do we say that? If we want to say there is a pen, as we know, we say kore wa, kore this, kore wa pen da. As for this, pen equals. As for this, it's a pen. But if we want to say this is not a pen, we say kore wa pen de wa nai. So what does that mean? Well, the de is the te form of da or des. So we still have kore wa pen da in the form of kore wa pen de, and then we're attaching nai. So what we're saying is, as for this, as for being a pen, it isn't. This is not a pen. Alright, so now let's move on to the largest part of this question, which is verbs. In order to put a verb into the negative, we have to attach nai, and we do this by attaching it to the a stem. What does that mean? Well, let's look at the stem system. The Japanese verb stem system is the simplest, the most logical, and the most beautiful verb transformation system in this world. It's almost absolutely regular. Once you know how to do it, you can make any transformation except for the te and ta form, which you already know. But the schools and textbooks don't tell you this. Instead of telling you this, they present each conjugation, as they call it, and they aren't in fact conjugations. They present each one as a separate case with separate rules, which appear to be random. And because they don't tell you the fundamental logic of the whole system, and because they describe the changes that take place as if they were really written in the Roman alphabet when they are written in kana, it really looks like that. Students really think they have to treat each case as a separate case and learn separate rules in every case. And you don't have to. You just have to know the STEM system. So let's look at it. As we've already learned, every verb ends in one of the ro kana. And I'm turning the chart on its side here for reasons you'll see in a moment. So these kana in the red box are the ones that can end a verb. It's not every uro kana, but it's most of them. So we have verbs like kau, bai, kiku, hear, hanasu, speak, motsu, hold, etc. Now, as you can see, there are 4 other possible ways in which a verb could end. And each of those 4 ways is used, and they are called the verb stems. Today, we're only going to look at the R stem, because that's the one we need for the negative. So to form the R stem, we simply shift the last kana of the verb from the ro to the a ro. So chiku hear becomes chika. Hanasu speak becomes hanasa. Motsu hold becomes motta, and so forth. There's only one exception in this system, and when I say that, I mean the whole system, all the stems. There's only this one exception, which is that when a word ends in the u kana, the stem doesn't change to a, it changes to wa. So the negative of kao is not ka nai, it's ka wa dai. And it's only in the a stem that we have this exception, so that's the only exception in the whole system, and I think you can see why it exists. Ka nai is not as easy to say as ka wa nai, is it? All the others are perfectly regular, and kiku here becomes kikanai, not here. Hanasu, speak, becomes hanasanai, not speak. Motsu, hold, becomes motanai, not hold, and so forth. And as we already know, with ichidan verbs, they only ever drop that ru and put on whatever we want to put on. So, kaberu, eat, becomes tabihanai, not eat. And that's it. That's how we turn any verb negative. It's very, very simple. Now what about adjectives? How do we make adjectives negative? Well, when we make a transformation to an adjective, what we always do is we turn the I on the end of it into ku. Akai is red becomes akaku. Kawaii is cute becomes kawaiiku. Kawaii is scary becomes kawaku. And this is the way we make the te form of adjectives. Aku becomes akaku te. And it's also the way we make the negative. Akai becomes akaku nai, not red. Now, interestingly, this ku is the opposite of what happens in the te form, isn't it? If a word ends in ku, in the te form, we turn that ku into I. But in an adjective, we turn the I into ku. If we want to put an adjective into the past tense, we take off the I and use kata. So, kawaii is scary becomes kawakata, was scary. And because nai is also an I adjective, when we put that into the past, we also say nakata. So, if we want to say Sakura runs, we say Sakura ga hashiru. Then we want to say Sakura doesn't run, we say Sakura ga hashiranai. If we want to say Sakura ran in the past, we say Sakura ga hashito, because it's a gojan verb. And if we want to say Sakura didn't run in the past, we say Sakura ga hashiranakata, hashiranai, and then we put nai into the past, hashiranakata. Now, as we all know, Sakura no hashiru is rather unnatural Japanese, just as it's rather unnatural English. We say Sakura is running in English, and in Japanese we say Sakura ga hashite iru. So if we want to put all that in the past, what do? All we have to do is put that iru into the past. So we say Sakura ga hashite iru. Sakura was running, and if we want to say Sakura wasn't running, we say Sakura ga hashite inakatta. That iru is a simple ichidan verb. So we just drop the ru and put on te or nai, and in the past nakatta. I always say that Japanese is like Lego. Once you know the basic building blocks, you can build anything, and there are almost no exceptions in Japanese. In the whole of what we've been talking about today, there are really just 2 exceptions, and I'm going to introduce those so that you know everything you need to know. The only real exception to every verb being made negative by adding nai is the verb masu, which is a helper verb which makes words formal. We add it to the I stem of a verb, and we will look at the I stem later, but I think you can already guess what it is. So hanasu becomes hanashimasu, kiku becomes kikimasu, and so on. When you put masu into the negative, it does not become masanai, as you would expect, it becomes masen. Because it's formal, it's a bit old-fashioned, and it uses the old Japanese negative sen instead of nai. The only other apparent exception is that I, the adjective I, which means good, has an older form, yoi, which is still used quite often. And when we make any transformation to I, it turns back to yoi. So, in the past tense, we didn't say ikatta, we say yoketta. And if you see much anime, you've probably heard this quite often. Yoketta. Literally, zero ga yoketta. It was good. That turned out well. That's great. And if you want to say something is not good, you don't say ikunai, you say yokunai. And those are the only exceptions. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below and I will answer. And if you'd like to join our learning community, please consider joining my Patreon, where you'll get access to all the behind-the-scenes discussion and be able to play a part in shaping this project of making Japanese as simple as it really is. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons for making all this possible and all my patrons on Patreon for helping this really exciting project to come to fruition. And thank you for attending this lesson. Korekara mo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Class dismissed.